All right. Welcome to Today in EVE Online. It's September 17th, 2019. We are still in post-blackout. It ended yesterday. We're going to talk about that and Sino changes. I have with me Lux, Caleb, and Ashterothi. Other people will be joining us throughout the program. How's it going, guys?
It's great.
Okay.
I actually made it to the beginning of the show.
Yeah, pays to get up early. Last time I started with sound a little bit low, so I'm going to make sure that that is all good. There. Okay, so I believe at downtime, well, I guess last downtime?
Well, starting yesterday.
Starting
right?
yesterday. It's hard to figure this out because it's a 24-hour game, different time zones. But we're at least, less than 24 hours into restored local chat in nullsec? Sound right?
Yes, we are past the 24-hour mark.
We are. Okay, so that's... And what do we know about it returning? Have the bots come back? Have the players come back? Is it a combination of both, or has no one come back? Well, the bots are definitely coming back. We know that. Let's have a look here. I did see something funny inside EVE Online forums. Going to latest tab, you can see what the latest stuff is. I usually go down this list and three pilots returning to EVE looking for a new home. Let's see if they say anything. Oh, they're just coming back. They didn't even know what was going on. Well, what have you guys seen? Anything? It's kind of early.
Well, obviously, I don't run into places that deal with blackout or not very often, so like my in-game stuff hasn't been impacted. I have, like everybody else, I've been pouring over the few stats that we have. While everybody's obsessed with the PCU, I've been watching the newborn player graph to kind of monitor the health of influx. One of the interesting things is that the largest spike in new player growth since, I think, Ascension, so the release of the Alpha Clone, was actually the day after the Drifter attacks. We see a big spike of new players, and it stays pretty high, and then it drops off a little bit. But then we got a spike on the 18th, which I can't remember exactly what that caused that. But then the biggest spike that we've received in the last 6 months occurred Sunday. And that actually disappoints me. That fact makes my heart sad a little bit.
Okay, explain why.
Because there's very few explanations for why a bunch of people would want to create a character on Sunday unless they were making new characters to respond to the blackout, which means probably a disproportional amount of like bots and stuff.
So the bots are coming back because a bunch of new accounts were created the day before blackout is lifted.
I mean, that's one way to look into it.
Well, what else could it be? People waiting out, people who never played EVE Online waiting out blackout?
The only other thing I could think of is if there were people who had not joined because they're friends or whatever, and now that their friend is going back into it, they're coming with them. But that's super idealistic. I admit that that's a very sad stat.
Yeah.
Now the good news is that it's only 200. Even as a spike, it's only 247 people, so it's only a spike theoretically of 100 people. But even still, it does show that like there is this tendency to want to get ready just in time.
Yeah. I mean, that could be one person with that many accounts. You never know with EVE Online what the count of the actual people that are playing it are compared to the actual accounts that they open. So when you see 250, it could actually be a handful of people opening up multiple accounts. That's one of the problems of this game, isn't it? Like, you don't really know what you're dealing with. The democracy of CSM is based on accounts. The player count that we look at to see what the population is based on accounts logged in. And there's any number of things that we refer to that always refer to accounts. It doesn't tell you
Right.
people. And why is that important?
Well, I mean, it's not that important until we start putting undue importance on those numbers. Like the PCU count, for example. Like everybody's been so obsessed and there's been so much fighting over it. But really, that stat tells you very, very, very little. Because it doesn't actually tell you what the behavior is, right? If we have 26,000 people logged in at one time, then that doesn't tell you if it's 26,000 people who log in at the beginning of the day and then sit in the station all day. Doesn't tell you if there's people logging in for 10 minutes at a time all over the place. And so actually like hundreds of thousands of people log in every day. Another good example is with the blackout, right? So everybody's talking about how, oh, the numbers dropped. But here's the thing, like if a significant portion of the population, if this botting or if multi-boxing was that big of an issue, and so everybody was suddenly not logging in with their huge farms of accounts, 10, 20, 30 people, then only a handful of people would have to quit to make it so that even if we actually got a huge spike in population boost, not saying that we did, but even if we did, it would be covered up by the number of people who are not logging in their 50 accounts, right? Or their 20 accounts, or whatever it is. Right. So the numbers themselves tell you very, very little by themselves. And the issue is that since it's the only ones that we have, we sit here and obsess over it and look at it and argue about it. And of course, like any good stat, you can look at it and make it say whatever you want it to, right?
Yeah. Are they bots coming back? Are they people coming back, etc.? Go ahead, Lux.
A better alternative, which is accessible to the players who know how to get at it, was provided by Rhivre in a recent article, which is looking at the overall market activity of EVE. It's worth a read. I think you've read it recently, Matterall.
One could say
that is definitely above and beyond the average. Like, we're going to argue about the PCU on Reddit.
I'm getting static from you, Ashterothi. It might be me, unfortunately. Let me see what I can do about that.
Am I good to you, Caleb?
It actually sounded good.
Or Lux?
You're kind of fine.
Okay.
Maybe back off the mic a little. I don't know what that static is. I heard it yesterday too, but it was when I wasn't recording. Okay, going on. Looking at Rhivre, the editor-in-chief of Imperium News, and also kind of a market person. You can see it's the Economy Stupid article, and there's lots of numbers, lots of funny lines, and more numbers.
Do you want Caleb to speak about the numbers for a bit, Matterall?
I found a graph. All right, go ahead, Caleb.
He's really selling this one.
Oh my god, I want a clip of that. That's the funniest thing this week. Graph lines. I don't know what the fuck.
I like the graph. I like the graphs. I'm a terrible American. I like the graphs, not the numbers.
Okay. A very too long didn't read. It's basically pointing out what you can see from the data and what some of the more detailed data. She's pretty much trying to pick apart some of the numbers that we got on the nice graph from the MER and actually looking at the detail. So looking at what's actually happening in each region and then graphing that and commenting on that and calculating the averages and then mentioning our very much missed developer, CCP Quant, because what he used to do was when he presented the MER data, then he would gather over the months and then he would show up at the events and then he would actually take that data, pick it apart and analyze it and give us actual new data that's meaningful and can be used for commenting on, which is the one you're showing right now, right? These are the things that Quant used to do, and this is what I think some of us, maybe at INN, maybe a bit biased, have been claiming that CCP is not doing anymore. That's just a fact. Whether they are doing that in-house, we don't know, but it doesn't feel like it.
Well, the fact is they're not presenting it to the public, not that they're not collecting it or analyzing it.
Yeah, and it just, from some of the things they say, it just doesn't feel as if they are looking at data in a meaningful way. And we've been laughing at the good old, 280 million ticks mistake that Quant did. Yes, he made a bit of a mistake with that, with the theoretical maximum of ratting, right? True, but it was still a fact that he was given, and it was still a theoretical fact, right? So it was a valid point that he was commenting on, and he didn't play the game much. He was hired for doing actual in-house business stuff, and he only did all this Eve stuff on the side as a personal interest. So he had to gather information from the player base. So he used to talk to us players and engage with us a lot. Well, this was pretty much what got us into digging in his data and actually sharing information. And we even had a lot of very nerdy things going on with analyzing market data back then, with Lockfox doing his show, and many things were happening.
He had an economic show.
Yeah, and we had fun trying to figure out what's happening, talk to Quant, what can we do with this data, what does it mean, blah, 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 back and forth all the time. And we also had fun talking to Nawal when he was around on the same topics. And I just don't feel that this is really what's going on anymore, or at least we don't know who's doing that in-house now. So no one is engaging with those data points, right? And we kind of need them to pick the whole thing apart, figure out what can we actually say, because we know that very flattened data and very big macro data is useless unless you start analyzing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like garbage in, garbage out with player opinions. Like, we actually need some good stuff to put in to get some good opinions.
Something
analysis.
From the CSM, as far as I heard, the bigger groups have actually been sharing some of their internal data points, and they actually go into a bit more detail than CCP actually does. They admitted that themselves. I think Hilmer was the one saying he was impressed and surprised at the fact that the player organizations are actually gathering very more detailed data than CCP is even pulling. Of course, CCP has massive advantage, and they can pull pretty much what they want. And Quant has shown some magical stuff back in the day when doing things on analyzing how meta change with balance changes to ships and stuff like that with the explosions. All of that was pretty much his tool, pulling that data out of the server. Right?
Back up a second. You said that Hilmar was impressed that players pull better data than CCP. I need a citation on that one because I've never heard him say that. He said he was really impressed with the renting apparatus that they had built and the legal document that it was a contract between players, and that was impressive and crazy how detailed that was. But that was something completely different than data collection.
Well, also the analytical tools that they have, like the IT infrastructure that they've built, which rivals and exceeds what people are actually doing in the real world in like real businesses.
I work in the real world, real business, and we have some pretty sophisticated, and we're not even in, well, I guess there is some privacy of IP information. I work in advertising, and we have some pretty sophisticated tools. I know Eve players have sophisticated tools too. There are a couple of little apps that are interesting and neat. Like, for instance, PL used to have a thing where if you took a screenshot of the forums, it would put the account name into the screenshot. It would embed it. You couldn't see it, but it was there. If you could, if you had Photoshop and could manipulate it, like I could do. But it was a way of watermarking whose account was taking the screenshot, and that would get you thrown out of PL. So there were tools like that that are interesting. Like, those are more interesting. And I know they're very sophisticated IT people play EVE Online. I stop short of saying that we run businesses better than real businesses, though.
Oh, that's the spyworks, though. That's steganography and stuff like that.
Ash?
I'm about to say, that is some counter-espionage, photocopier marking, capture the leaker crap right there, man.
Yeah. But, you know, in my world where we do a lot of commercials that can't air before, you know, they can't be leaked onto the internet, we have some sophisticated tools to prevent that. And it does a lot of that sort of thing. If any video gets out there, it's watermarked and attached to a name that distributed it. And so we have a point of accountability. That's pretty sophisticated. I think all tools have become more sophisticated. And CCP, EVE players are no exception to that, but they're not ahead of the curve. They're either at it or, you know, it just depends on what kind of IT person you have. There's some amazing IT persons out there. I call them the Illuminati of EVE Online, because those are the people that really make or break an alliance when an alliance becomes high profile. They have to protect it, and they also have to, they have to protect it. That's their main priority. They have to keep it running. And you have DDoS attacks, you have infiltration, you have spy catching, you have all this stuff that people have to do. But they also sometimes go on the attack depending on what group they're with.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that came out of Rhivre's article is when we started talking about, but what are the things that we can't capture? And we started realizing that some of the new Triglavian content has aspects where it's just hidden, right? There's things that aren't necessarily on the market, that are part of things that aren't well measured. And, people brought up, oh, well, what if someone's using deliveries instead of the market or instead of contracts? Like, there's things that we just can't look at very readily when we're trying to figure out what's going on in Eve.
Yeah, and the tool is a little bit broken in some sense because of that whole thing with the normalization thing. And then many of the fixes that we asked for that Quant was about to actually do have not been done. So we pretty much don't have the optimal data. Even the data that we are allowed to get from the MER is kind of broken.
Yeah. Well, and is that okay, or is that a problem?
It's a problem if they are partially outsourcing some of the information to us to comment in a credible way back to them through the CSM, right? So if they're handing us some of these things to maybe notice, was it Jintan that said that CCP seems to be using the e-player base a little bit like the red team of a corporation, right? The ones that are supposed to figure out what mistakes shouldn't go out in the wild, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they want us to be able to do that, we need better data, and we need to actually be heard when we're saying that some of the data is flawed.
Yeah,
but in a game, go ahead, Lux.
We're not going to be a very effective analytical tool if we can't actually get at any of the information that you need to make those right judgments and to build the model correctly. We'll be flawed before we even start.
Yeah, and some of us actually like doing this, right? And then we're back to the perfect data and using it as intel tools, and the whole argument that Aerith has tried to make that we shouldn't really get too much information. I agree pretty much completely. But if they want us to do these things, at least we need to get better quality data that's then older. Because looking at it historically is just as valuable for people interested in this, and it might also pull in some interest from outside actual real life academics. Right?
Do they want us to do this?
Well, the historical
there's an assumption
data
there.
isn't really.
There's an assumption there that CCP wants us to be analyzing the data and talking about players coming and going. If that's what you're talking about, Caleb.
I think he's
not
talking
so
about
much as the player data. That's not really relevant. But the in-game market data and seeing those correlations and analyzing what is the effect of this patch, what's the effect of that patch, what did that balance change actually cause? All of these things is extremely important and interesting to CCP and to the player base.
But is that what CSM is supposed to deliver along with everything else? Is that what players are supposed to deliver along with everything else?
I mean, we like to say as players that we know best, but can we and do we? Well, maybe we could if we had that information available.
Well, this is back to the fact that CCP does not, as far as we know, or as far as I know, they don't have a red team internally, right? They might have some that do that role, but they don't have an actual team, and they don't have an actual dedicated balance team, right? Many of these things they don't have. They just don't have the manpower, and the game is not big enough to support that economically, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the budget. So outsourcing some of that to some sort of crowdsourcing to the player base would be actual genius, right?
No.
It's actually taking advantage of the fact that they have all these brainy, nerdy players that actually want to help.
It would be a disaster in a competitive game that's PvP, not only in spaceships but also in economic strategy. That would be a disaster to give out too much information. Well, it is
content.
It's
I've
just
had
about
this discussion with you before. It's content. If you need to have it delayed so it can't be abused. You need to have it obscure and fog of war, right? So then it
historical data is fine. You could release historical data with like a time on it, so from 6 months before present, and then it's not so much of a problem.
Maybe. Let me cut you off, Caleb, and take you
the
to
thing is-
Ashterothi. Go ahead.
Yeah. The thing is that, like, if you get the answer, then that means two things. One, it means that you have the answer, and two, it means that you no longer have to guess, right? And those are actually two separate things. So if we have this perfect data and we're able to do an analysis on it and come to concrete conclusions that we can all agree on, then that means we stop arguing about it. And arguing's good.
It's not
in this
abuse
context.
if it's historical, right? It's not really easily abusable, and it still leaves every control in the hands of the current players actively doing stuff, and in the hands of CCP. So it's not really going to be.
I just think
It's not
this.
about-
Look, you have a lot of players, right? And if you give them information, do this analysis and deep thinking because they're obsessed with EVE Online, as a benefit to EVE Online, because CCP can look at that and say, "Oh, look what the players found." There's one caveat: the players don't have to say what they don't want to say. They can give you 5 of the 6 data points, but the 6th one is the one that's really important, and that's a competitive advantage across the board. And that's what I'm afraid of. And here's the thing: if you think
You
that
only
doesn't
have that
happen,
advantage if you're
hold on a
gathering
second.
the data from
Lux,
being a really big alliance.
if we talk at the same time, it goes staticky. I've been noticing. So,
Yeah.
what if you don't think that happens in EVE Online? You're not paying attention. There are a lot of tools that are exposed to the public as community tools that people give out, but there's a lot of tools that never see the light of day. Those are secret analytical tools that players use because there's a lot of programmers. And even look at what was said about the wormhole candidate to CSM a couple years ago. He was the leader of Hard Knocks, and it was said that he didn't give up a lot of secrets on what the wormholers were doing as compared to the current wormhole CSM representative who said, here's all the ways that we're working the system and I'm exposing them all to you. The guy before that didn't do that. Why not? Because a lot of players don't expose their advantages. And if you give out a ton of financial information to people, even if it's historic, I think, but I'll put that aside for now, but certainly current economic information, you're giving a competitive advantage to players across the board. They should be able to read a certain amount, and everybody should read the same amount.
Can I just say that the current null representatives have been doing that, this CSM, the one before, and at least the one before that. They've pretty much been doing exactly that with all the null data, with all their arguments for what is broken and what needs to be fixed and how. It's just that if CCP won't actually look at that and listen to that, then it's just.
And also by providing that data, it's not that they're providing competitive advantage, it's that they're democratizing data which is already being used for competitive advantage by the groups that are able to gather it. So if you look in the past with like people like Caleb when they were scraping market data using alts all across EVE, when they democratize that into like a website you can go onto and check it, because now CCP have provided like an ESI for you to get it. That's actually democratizing that information being used for competitive advantage. Just like when we used to have kill boards that were only in the corporation, only in the alliance. When you get something like Zkill, where for the most part all the kills are now public information, that's democratizing information. It's removing competitive advantage.
This is what I've been trying to explain to Matterall, that something like the roadmap and something like information being shared back and forth between the player base and CCP and actually writing some proper dev blocks, all of these things democratized speculation. In this era, with no roadmap, with no sharing of vision, with no sharing of what's happening, with no detailed dev blocks until long after it's too late, right? Then you have the problem that then the CSM members, and thus the null entities or the representatives entities, are going to be extremely advantaged, right? Because this is back to the whole kind of tinfoil hattery with compartmentalizing, that if you are the leader of an nullsec alliance and you are also a representative on the CSM, you can't compartmentalize or not know what you've been told. Right. So you can't really easily not act upon it. And again, this ties back to the fact that these entities will somehow have some of the knowledge they have influence the way of thinking and their discussions internally. So you do have an advantage, and you are basically disadvantaging people like myself. I don't have CSM access. I used to read the dev blogs. I used to read the roadmap. I used to try to predict things economically based on that information. Now I don't have it. It's not democratized anymore.
Okay, you brought up a good point that I want to go back to. Lux, you can talk right after this. That is that if you're a CSM member, you can't unhear what you heard, and you can't take it out of the mental equation where you're doing calculations on how to advise your group or other groups on how to do things. And this is why I think it's interesting, and I'm going to get hit for tinfoiling. So I'm going to put it right out there. This is tinfoil. I don't have any, only evidence I have is that CSM was not told about Blackout leaving until 2 days before. They were told 2 days before. The order went out from all the umbrella empires to ground their routers for 1 week. They all said 1 week, which to me is like conspiracy and collusion. They're definitely, now who said it first? Who said this is about 1 week, sounds about right, may have informed the other groups that we're doing it like this, and they may have said, let's do the same thing, and they were silly enough to write it in the same language. But
I'm gonna
hold on a second. Let me finish just this point, because I want to finish it. Now, I don't think they were told, yeah, it's 1 week, but I think they're smart guys. I think they know their data. They know some of the stuff that CCP exposed to them as far as data and numbers. They could probably mood check the room. Like there's some signals that are sent when you're at a meeting, and then you can make an estimate saying, I think by the time they hit G Fleet, they'll reverse it because they don't want to go into Vegas with people angry at them, right? Like you can make that calculation if you could feel the room out and feel what the mood was like. So I think the meta gets to that level. And I think that's why they might have said, let's wait a week. Let's wait till G Fleet, see if they lift it. So for now, just keep everything grounded, keep everything safe.
Can I steer you away a little bit from the topic, but stay on it? Okay. What I'm saying, what I want to say is that one of the reasons I don't want to run for CSM, and I haven't actually decided or gone in there at all for all these years since I was on the cherry pick one, is mainly because of this. Because I don't want to hurt my ability to play the market game, right? If I am on the CSM, I will be handicapped like Aerith, and basically I will not be allowed to do the things that I like in the game. So that's equivalent to taking me completely out of the game, right? But I am still going to be potentially abusable in the sense that if I'm even talking to my market friends, right, they will be able to discern what I am not saying or what I am not doing and not saying they should do. So you're basically able to figure out what is happening by negative knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. It's inverting what I'm not saying, because then that might actually be the thing that's most likely going to happen. And it's very similar to what's happening with Aerith. I'm not saying Aerith leaks or is abusing his knowledge. I'm saying that from what he is not telling you to do, right, you can pretty much figure out indirectly what might be the right thing to do.
Well, what was telling to me was you had an Ominate on the Meta Show saying CCP's death spiraling the game. And then either that same day, it might have been later or maybe it was before, I don't know, it still doesn't matter. You had Aerith saying, I have full confidence CCP is going to make the game better or will do the right thing or something like that. I don't know. But I started seeing like Aerith is saying something positive. And I thought at first, oh, he might be sending a signal that there's too much doom and gloom out there, guys, and it's hurting us because we've lost 20% of our own people. So since we're the target of Blackout, in a sense they were target of it because they're the ones that have capital umbrellas, super capital umbrellas. And so I thought he was being more damage control-y. But look, I'm already looking at what he's saying and using that as a way of figuring out what's actually going on.
Well, yeah, it depends whether what's the audience as well, like which one of those messages is broadcast publicly and which one of those is for internal consumption. And obviously the internal consumption should be, yeah, everything's fine, please don't leave because you're talking to your own players.
Yeah.
But what do you care if you broadcast to the rest of the game? You guys should all leave, the game's dying, because that's how you truly win EVE. You make your enemy stop playing.
Yeah.
And be careful with the whole Ares analysis, because you're going to end up in some sort of iocane problem where he's actually immune and you're just going to die.
No, he's not all powerful. He's made some huge mistakes. I haven't written about it, but there was definitely him working with Genton to get them up into pure blind, and I think he was freelancing some of the diplomacy that was going on there. And I don't think he realized how toxic Jay Maricady was to the Imperium.
I think
and
I think
that
that you
blew
missed
up.
the reference. I don't think the
You
Sicilian
missed
was.
the
Did I miss the
reference,
reference? Oh,
Can't
sorry.
even
Okay. Totally missed it.
It's from the Princess Bride, the Sicilian iocane powder. He kills
The
himself.
double bluff, triple bluff,
The other guy's
quadruple bluff.
the other guy's immune.
You know what? I've seen that movie a few times, but I don't remember
Spoiler.
that line. Don't remember that line. Ash, you were
Thank
going to
you,
say.
Ash, for doing that. That
Thank
was
you.
awesome. Thanks.
I totally goofed up. I'm embarrassed. Go ahead, Ashterothi. What do you think? Did you say
Well,
something?
so this is all just like, I could be totally wrong, and I'm going to say this out loud so that way if I am wrong, somebody can correct me.
you. Yeah.
So
It works well
the
for
first
me.
I heard about no kidding. The best way to find out the right answer is to be wrong on the internet. So what I had first heard, I first heard the grounding thing from some of my high level friends in goons and whatnot, as they were very excited at this idea that with the wormhole with the Sino changes, they were going to ground their fleet for a week and go hunting. And so, and I heard that from the fireside chat, and I hadn't heard those concepts.
Talk at an angle to your mic because you're blowing right into it. So if you talk at an
That's
angle,
what it is.
yeah.
All right. So at any rate, they were going to ground their fleet to go hunting for a week, and so that came out of the fireside chat. And then if it did start from there and it got out to the other alliances, it would make sense that people would be like, yeah, you know what, no caps for a week. So I don't know. I see less conspiratorial.
Yes, no, it's still
causes.
conspiratorial, but I think you're right. Maybe it wasn't like, hey, everybody do the same thing we're doing. Let's do this. Let's sync the PCU numbers, which were the kind of pieces of puzzle that were coming together if you're conspiratorially minded, which I partially am. But I heard the same thing, but I heard it from Goonswarm guys that said, yeah, we're the ones that came up with 1 week. So, but I still think, and I do know, I think Killa B confirmed it live on air a few shows ago, that yeah, they talked about it inside the Null First Discord, like it was something that was discussed.
That's true. I mean, either way, they have these new mechanics for cross-pollination across the organizations now.
Yeah, and I don't know how that sits with me. I think it further puts a nail in the I don't know what's going to happen coffin. And that's what's killed me about Blackout. And Blackout, I've been watching the game for a while now, and I could see a lot of the patterns that are forming. Like if it's not the first time that the Imperium has marched up into in NC territory and PL territory, right? They did it when they came down from Deckline into Fountain, into Delve itself. Like there's definitely been times when the Imperium marches on NC and NC doesn't have the people to make up for the amount of people that are coming at them. And so I've seen these cycles happen. The same thing happened in Tribute more recently, where you brought up 500 to 1,000 Titans up to the north. And there was a little skirmish, but that was it. It was, if you look at the way that Imperium fights, you're going to win a few battles at the beginning, but you're going to lose the war. Because what they do is they test things too. Today is not the day for phone calls. They test things. They have fights. I don't know why we have a home phone. Like it's used for one person, but I got to get rid of it somehow. They usually come into an area and they throw a few fleets away. Now, maybe it's not on purpose, but maybe they're just getting their footing, but they're testing things out. And then after they lose a few, they make different strategies, they make adjustments, they bring more people, they bring the right hardware or whatever, and then they start to apply pressure with a ton of people. And eventually that breaks whoever they're coming after. So that happened in Tribute. They came up and they fed a few fleets to NC Dot, and NC was like, wow, we actually punched them in the nose. Even though they're much bigger than us, we punched them in the nose and they withdrew. But that was definitely a temporary victory, and they knew it because right after that, their supply line was basically cut off. They attacked a Keepstar that was behind the front lines, and at that point, you're cut off from escape. So instead of sitting there fighting and possibly dying, NCMPL withdrew completely, and that was the collapse of Tribute. So I might have gotten off point here, but seeing these patterns, here's the point. Seeing these patterns, you kind of know how the story's going to end. Blackout, for me, was looking at something, and I didn't know how it was going to end. And it was starting to happen, but it didn't, which is why I said I don't think it was around long enough. Sure, there was pain. Sure, people left the game. There's people say they're not coming back, the sampling group that we have. The numbers show that a ton of new accounts are created. 250 accounts are created right away. Shows me that those are bots coming back because now, hey, maybe botting works again. Should be too bad.
I think they might have. They might be wrong about that. I'm seeing some writing on the wall that the new content they're going to bring to nullsec isn't going to be bot friendly at all.
Good. Well, but the botters don't know that, right? I mean, there's people who get killed. There's people who do not follow the game the way we talk about it. They don't even talk to corp mates that follow the game like we talk about it. So they have no idea what's really going on.
Most of their core mates have no idea what's going on and will just feed them bad information.
Yeah, that's true too.
I've been in so many different organizations where there's like one dude who's been around for longer than everybody else, and he has an answer to everything, and half of them are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Is this self-reflection, Ash?
Yeah. So Dunk's asking a good question. How long would you let Blackout run to get the metric that you want to use? What do you guys think? That's a good question.
I think they should have based it on maybe some metrics that they had from the past with bigger changes that had impact on a lot of the population, right? How long did it take to see a proper adaptation? How long did it take for the groups to adapt, and how long for the market to actually respond to it? They do have data like that. So it's not like they couldn't know how long to run it.
Yeah. And I'm with Manic Velocity there, and we talked about it before. Rolling blackouts is kind of an interesting idea. I think that gives the... I think you can just go around bot collecting at that point, right? Because you're going to sweep up bots when they get dysfunctional, or you're going to let players eat them up because they're going to have the blackout advantage. So yeah, just make it come and go. Go ahead.
And this is cool. This is cool. This is just the classic feature creep because we all like that idea, and it would be awesome. And we were talking last night with Ash about what if a blackout actually was a precursor to a drifter attack. There's so many fucking cool things we can do, and the dream and the vision is that, except I don't think that's even remotely technically feasible. I think we're so far off, and I think many of the problems we have now are exactly because it's not technically feasible.
You were saying it was a switch. They just needed to flip a switch. You've been saying that for the last 2 months.
Not for a rolling blackout, not for a featured and conditional blackout,
okay.
where you have these zones that go black, which is amazing. I would love that. I actually like what we have now, randomized local. The bots can't figure this shit out. Mm-hmm. We need more of that.
Yeah.
See, I would love that too, and I don't know, judging from how sporadically local works and doesn't work, whether or not CCP can actually have a gameplay feature where you turn it off and on and it works reliably. But what we do have that reliably works is wormhole space. Local's always off in there. So if you push people from nullsec, you break down that wall between the different zones and you push them into a wormhole to do this content. 1, you can't get supers through them. And 2, it's blacked out in there. So they do actually have a mechanism to do this if they use wormholes. And guess where drifters live? Wormholes.
I mean, if you're right, Manarol, then I mean, really, it depends on really what kind of data that they're looking for and what they're planning on doing with it, and whether or not this confirms or denies something, or whatever. I suspect that the idea of where it settles was less interesting to them than what happens when everything's up in the air. So once things start to settle, now the experiment's over. You're done getting your good data.
Yeah. Going back, I need to answer a few questions because people are asking me some stuff here. Well, to answer Dunk's question, do you guys have any? How long would you let Blackout run? Anybody else have any suggestions on it?
that's very hindsight
Yeah.
discussion.
I would have let it run longer. I would have let it run to at least December. I would have let the people that are going to leave because they can't survive in those circumstances leave. I know that sounds terrible, but I kind of feel like if you're going to leave because you can't rat in something you can't afford to lose, then you're probably part of the problem. I hate to say it that way. I'm not trying to chase anybody out of the game, but
CCP has been quite clear. They think umbrellas are too safe and they unbalance the economy. They don't want nullsec to be a place where you come and your goal is, I'll safely make ISK until I can fly a capital ship for making more ISK. They
or
don't
that
want
much.
nullsec to be that.
That much
Before,
ISK, right?
before you trigger my whole faucet thing, I'd just like to do the 2020. I think I would have let it run a month, see the numbers, and from what they have, what the reaction was from the player base, I might actually have gone out and said, well, we're doing this because we're gathering data and we are going to put in a counter to this as we had planned, right? Then I would let it run that month and maybe one more. And if they couldn't actually figure out how to deliver something like the compromise with observatory arrays, I just come out and just flat out say it's a bit more tricky to create these conditional chat designs. We are working on it, but we are turning off the blackout because we can't deliver it in time.
Yeah.
I
Go Ash.
I want to take a different angle at this.
By the way, those numbers, G Fleet, right? Let's talk about the G Fleet thing that we heard. People who were talking in G Fleet got the sense that CCP was happy with the data they got, and not as many people were leaving as we thought, right? Because we talked about it every day.
Right. And we've heard this before G Fleet too. Like the CCP has said several times that while a lot of people have threatened to leave, not as many people have actually stopped. A lot of people have cut down. There's been a lot of change in activity, but not actually a huge reduction in the player base like many of us like to suspect.
But the counter argument is what? The subscriptions don't run out for 3 months, so how can you tell? Like, isn't that the counter argument to that?
Well, I mean, if they're still logging in, but they're only logging in one character for like 20 minutes, that means they're still at least there, right?
And they know the instant that something gets canceled, like the potential loss that's coming, say, in a week or whatever. But anyway.
A small comment on the umbrella thing, if you don't mind, right? I think it's frustrating that there is this Gurgoon narrative, because if
it's
you're talking about something,
too. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I just want people to start actually looking at the data, right? Look at how many Titans or how big the umbrellas are compared to how big the region that they're defending is, right? How much space is being defended and how many people are being serviced by that defense, right? And if you do that, you will see that goons are actually the least problem in Null at the moment.
By what measure? Are you crazy? What?
Number of Titans, number of space held, number of players serviced. Do the math.
I'm doing the math. Look at the mining that's been done over the past few months. You don't think that's out of whack with everybody else?
That's because of the faucet. That's my whole point. That's the faucet.
I thought asteroids weren't a faucet.
It's not the umbrella. It's not the regions held. It is the fucking faucets. It's how much is in the regions and how much you can bang on that faucet forever. It's the whole point that only 60, maybe 70% of Delve was needed to support the entire Imperium. That's the problem.
I don't disagree, but also I think there's a difference between. I don't disagree with the faucets, right? They certainly have to turn those off, but I think the blackout was more than just the faucets. It's dismantling the actual defense apparatus. You can have a defense fleet. That's totally fine, and it's neat and logical, and empires should have defense fleets. It's the ability to, it's the cyclone that I got into, right? Where you have something that protects big money and the big money buys more protection. And that's a cycle. It fed itself. So you got to a point where you could see that you would never be able to change the status quo because it was insulating itself. And that means we know how the story ends. And now that everybody else started to do it, now we know how the story ends for reals, because they're now all in the same Discord server and they all have their cut of space, and they're going to run that into they're going to run that as long as they can for their people. And that's not interesting.
So we don't want Eve to have an end game. We want Eve to keep going.
I want to take a stab at the blackout question from a different angle, which is that I would keep blackout until I was ready to announce the winter expansion. Because I would put all of that announcement in one place. Like at the end of it, if it's Vegas, if it's G Fleet, wherever it is, I'd be like, all right, for the last several months, nullsec has gone from a ISK wonderland to a hellscape of wormholes and blackouts and drifters and oh my god. But now we are going to be unleashing this. And so everybody gets to be excited about this. And we're going to be lifting the blackout. So it's like lifting up the gates. 1, 2, 3, go, new content. And then everybody will, and then it'd be exciting and blah, 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 and whatever.
You're such a
And
magician.
new content.
That's
Just
how I do
New
it.
content that fundamentally makes you want to do it together with people,
Yeah.
which is what the new content in high sec and low sec is. You can't do it alone, can you, Ash?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be levels of cooperation and blah, blah, blah.
People ask
All
what-
this cool stuff. Imagine Jesus feature here. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, fill in the
I
blanks.
mean, I still want to see Snuff drop on one of Ash's low sec world arc fleets with dreads.
I don't.
I mean, I do. It would be really interesting to me to see. Entertaining. Think of your audience, Ash.
Come on.
Actually, I
Joe.
think it'd be really hard for them to drop on a world arc. They could definitely do it in a minor. Major would even be difficult because major is dead space, so they'd have to warp their capitals in, which
Yeah.
is a bit more anticlimactic.
Yeah, so
Well, why can't you drop on a world arc? Like, why?
The world arc, I don't even think they can get their capitals in there at all because the inside, I believe, is dead space, and outside is now an acceleration gate. So
you can't do these sites in supers, basically.
So minors have no dead space, no nothing. You can do whatever you want. Majors are dead space, so you can't warp, you can't, and you won't be able to light sinos. And then World Arc, I believe in the inside is dead space, and on the outside is that gate. So hard no for caps is what it looks like.
So basically, the high-end content that we might be getting is not accessible to capitals. That means that capitals won't be our end game PvE ship.
For invasion content as it currently is. But I mean, things are expanding in this every week. I mean, we've gotten the Rasnabor, we've now got emergent conduits. So I mean, like, I have no idea what it'll look like by the time it gets to nullsec. I feel like the world arc is, I mean, like, since they said it's designed for 10 to 15 people, they really don't want it to be like 2 carriers or something like that.
Well, what would happen if you lit you just can't light a Sino inside them? Is that
Well,
what you're
it's dead
saying?
space.
Right, okay.
You can't light sinos in dead space.
Mm-hmm. A couple other questions here. Somebody want to know what I do in the game. I do market stuff generally. I don't know if that's just the trajectory of players, but at a certain point you just start doing market trading and stuff like that. So I do a lot of market trading in high sec, different places. Some building, a lot of just betting on the future, that kind of stuff. I don't go roaming around in blackout looking for things to kill. I don't have Rorquals sitting there sucking on giant asteroids, although I love all that gameplay. I don't have the uninterrupted time for that.
Someone in chat mentioned that bots might learn how to descan, which I thought was a funny idea. Just want to note that recons don't show up on descan.
Yeah, that's that's a good point.
Only one of them doesn't. Like, one doesn't show on this scan but cannot cloak, and the other one can use cover-ups cloak but will show on this
Which
scan.
one can light the
Won't
Sino?
show when it's cloaked.
All
The cloaking one is the
recons
one
can
that'll
light
sign up.
The
Sinos.
cloaky one is the one that can open the Sino.
Okay.
Oh, I thought they both could.
No,
No.
only the
If-
combat one, is it? No, the Force Recon.
Force, I think.
The Force Recon. I think the combat one's the one that I don't know. I'm gonna have to look all this up.
I mean,
Rapier,
I
the
wouldn't mind if
Pilgrim.
they actually expanded Sinos onto both the recons then, because it'd be pretty funny
Yeah.
having a... I mean, because then if you wanted to light a Sino off grid, right, you could do it with the one that doesn't show up on DScan. It gives you that option.
Well, Right. I want to go back to where we started. We have to wrap up pretty soon. It's too bad. Wish we could do this longer. The chart that. Okay, so I think from what I read in the conclusion, that activity is down, and that's a scary thing. Does that kind of characterize the article, saying that economic activity is even worse than people disappearing, because that means less people are doing things? And if you look at the graph that we have here that CCP put out, that economic activity should actually grow because one person can step in and start manufacturing more than 3 people that left. So the player count goes down.
It's explaining the downward spiral. It's basically explaining how a collapse happened, right? So when you get bad things happening, eventually they will all just potentially start spiraling downwards, and it's really difficult to stop a death spiral. It's almost impossible. So if this ends up in a proper colony collapse situation, it's going to be very hard to come back. And as I was kind of talking to Ash about the other night, and you, Merrill, you can reach like a bottom where then it's like a flash fire, and then it needs to regrow back, right? And it can potentially do that because Eve players are very deeply seated in the game, so they can actually rebuild it. But it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get it back to a healthy point after that.
I mean, or maybe Eve is like an Australian eucalyptus forest. Maybe it needs the fire to come through to make the new seeds germinate.
Yeah, or redwoods.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Redwoods, they don't actually, their cones are hung up high and they won't open unless there's heat. And the heat has to come from below. So the heat opens the redwood cone and the seeds fall out. And that works that way because when a fire passes through, it also, and these are low intensity fires, right? It also opens up the soil. So the seeds actually have a place to plant. So
we're going to have to ask Ash about this because he's the one that's tending all the babies. Are these babies that you're watching, are they actually going to be positively affected by fires?
Yeah.
So I think it's funny that you call them babies because as Matterall can probably attest,
yeah, totally.
A huge chunk of our people, a very large percentage, is actually old and relatively experienced players of all different types.
Like Alliance tournament players.
Yeah, we have.
It's because you were saying you were looking at the newborn stats from Evil. That's why I was pointing out those were the numbers.
Well, those are bots. Those are.
Out. Well, no. Well, I mean there is a lot of uptake in new players, and I mean the answer is yes, they will, because like let's say, assuming this is a fire in this metaphor, and it burns out a bunch of the current existing infrastructure, and these guys now come in this new fertile, well-built, not MPE, but able to understand the game, so onboarding process. Then yeah, I think that they would do quite well.
Yeah. If there is you want to understand who's going to welcome fire, you need to talk to the Australian players, because our seeds don't germinate because of the heat. Our seeds germinate because of the smoke.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I wonder. I think it's the heat. I don't think it's the smoke, but it would be the same cause, right? Another thing is if there's a surge of new players after Blackout has been called off, I just see no reason to think that a substantial amount of those are new players coming in because Blackout's lifted. They didn't know the consequences of Blackout. So
correct. That in that particular like day before Blackout lift spike almost certainly is a troublesome stat.
Those are alts or bots. That's what that is. It just makes so much sense that, we're back in business. Let's go, guys. Work up those characters. I just think that's, so that's of those 4,300 that were banned, right? This is a small spike of recovery, which is what, 270 or whatever. It's not really that many if you think about it. So maybe the smashing of bots is kind of working. They're taking out more than are coming back. But over time, as long as it's feasible, people will bring more and more characters online, use macros to generate income while they're away from their computer.
Right. And as I mentioned before, anytime the more times that they can cause a action that requires a reaction from the bots, the more data points they get to be able to track these things down to their source.
Hey Ash, do you think anyone could bot a World Arc site?
I'd just like to do a very short CCP, please, right? Because these last weeks, all the ecosystem science discussions and terminologies that we've been throwing around and analyzing, I think CCP needs to make the next project discovery an ecosystem science one.
Somebody asks, why can't CCP just block macros? If you have to understand how botting software works, and we can get into it at a different time, but essentially it mimics human behavior, and you can even put in variables. Instead of clicking the mouse, because you move your mouse around, instead of clicking it at the same place each time by putting in coordinates, you can put a variability. So the defenses they have for it, of course, this is 2003 technology, so it's probably changed since then. It looks like a human.
Spotting software,
Yeah.
no one discounts.
Yeah. How do you think I made so much money? Just kidding. All that.
The programmers are ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a game that's that difficult to code bots for. So they're going to be so much ahead if they have some experience from making bots for other games. So it's just an endless fucking arms race.
But they mimic human behavior, and it's very close. At some point, I think somebody was writing in the forums. We didn't find it, but they killed somebody and said, "You're a bot. You got to get out of here." And so they killed them and all this other stuff. And the person wrote back saying, "I was playing remotely from my cell phone or my mobile phone," and that's a reality too. People play remote from their phone. They log into their computer at home and they're actually trying to do some stuff. Now, maybe the guy was just sitting there mining, so it's not that hard. You're not going to PvP through your phone, but there are people who are just like, okay, so I'm going to empty that bucket and then actually put the mining laser back on, and it looks like a bot, but it's actually a player being AFK. So there's a huge gray zone between botting, AFKing, and actually being at your computer and playing the game. There's a lot of gray in that area. And why don't we like bots? Bots are like cheating. It's like there's a bottleneck to this game, and that is time. People's time sitting at the computer and playing. That's a bottleneck. And if you can get past that, you can do a lot better than people who can't get past that.
And this is why I think it's important to look at things like geography and player versus player balance, because bots can't really do that effectively. So they need to incentivize on those areas, right? You need to want to move around. You need to want to engage players. That's why I was mentioning that maybe we need to make the loot fairy a little bit more friendly, so PvP is more incentivized, which is what Elizabeth brought up with PvP is not profitable. And maybe it should be at least a little bit better than it is currently.
By the way, the shared bookmarks, are those Alliance bookmarks? The new announcement from G Fleet?
No, the new bookmarks are going to be ACL based. So
they're it's just bookmark sharing.
Right. You can just, whoever has ownership of that ACL can just see it or edit to it. So you can have a bookmark list for
ACL
Alliance,
ACL is access list. Sorry, access list.
Access control list, more specifically.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if it's your alliance or your corporation, you or the market. You can share a list of bookmarks. So that's a whole new system that was built on the CCP devs' spare time. So remember, CCP is putting a ton of effort in the new player experience. I think 70% is what we've heard from, I think it was CCP Rise that said that, about 70% of devs. That means programmers that are programming to clean up the new player sticking points. They're not doing a new player experience. They're just cleaning up the terrible beginning of the game where people get lost all the time. And I think that has a lot of senior or older players concerned it's not enough dev time for them. And here's my hypothesis.
I think an important thing about this thing is that they are adding the ACL functionality to a completely different feature than controlling access on things like structure. And I think that's really interesting because that means that it can potentially go on so many other things. I'm not going to start the whole feature creep discussion, but Ash and Lux and I were talking about this, and it's got so much potential.
Yeah.
So you could build a working bounty system around it, actually, which I think the players would really enjoy.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
So come
talk
hang
about it
out
another
in
time.
public. Yeah, come hang out in public after the show, and you guys can kick around ideas on what these bookmarks are and how they can be used in the future. And there's a lot of mutations and permutations, I guess, that can come out from these bookmarks. But I wanted to get to something a little controversial before we end. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe we should stop and because we don't want to go. We've been here an hour.
What, talking about Sinos better or something like that?
No, we never got to sign. We'll have to do it tomorrow. But here is something, and again, I'm in a tinfoil mode here. That
Should I stop you now?
Probably, but I'm going to say it. I'm just going to put it out there because it's an idea. We play with ideas, okay? So this is not something that I hope for. 30% of the programming going to things that are already here, 70% going to cleaning up the sticking points of the people that are coming. CCP's always wanted to get retention up. What game wouldn't? But they were always also trying to keep those players that were here. And there's a massive shift away from that. What do you think? And Ashterothi, I think you and I have talked about this. Does CCP want a new batch of players? And I don't mean like in addition to, I mean like, let's try to get a different player base or a different group of players, different players that want to do a different kind of thing.
I would, yeah. I mean, like, I've said it in different ways, but basically they are doing a lot to court more achiever-like characters as opposed to killer-based characters or explorer-based characters, as they've done in the past. So you're seeing things like the agency, the character tracker, invasions, abyss, all these different things that you can challenge yourself with and engage with that isn't necessarily related to only ISK per hour or something along those lines. And what you're seeing is a different, a very different culture of players that come to like the corporation that I'm in and other newer corporations.
Yeah.
As far as whether or not they're trying to like purposefully make people leave, I think that it's more that they're trying to purposefully no longer be held hostage by those who want the game to stay a certain way and are willing to threaten to quit to keep it that way.
I like what Rankark says. They want less whiny players.
You're assuming that they're going to be less whiny. I don't think that assumption is going to play out the way you think.
Maybe all gamers are whiny.
You say that, but if you create content that changes and is more dynamic, it doesn't just affect people not being able to bot it. It actually means that you're selecting for players that want to be adaptable.
Yeah. Well, look, we've done the PvP thing, right? And where are we now? It's not necessarily a winning formula. I know they think it is. The people who do it think it is. And those are the people who are loudest. Those are the people that we hear from all the time. And those are the people that you hear from all the time. If you're here listening to this, you probably hear Epic PvP is the only game in town. And they can't even conceive that there are different ways to play the game and different archetypes of players. What was that?
I just point out that when the faucets are broken, it's really not that epic. It just looks like it. It's still just good fights.
It is good fights. It's terrible game. It's terrible gameplay in a meaningful way. But go ahead, Ashterothi. What are the Bartletts? What's it called? The Bartles?
Oh, the Bartles taxonomy. So
Yeah.
there's the socializers, killers, achievers, and explorers, which are kind of the four motivational factors of players, in particular in MMOs. So achievers want big numbers.
Missing the fifth one of the people that come in and they just want to ruin the game for everyone.
That's killers.
Like that.
Those are
Oh,
killers.
that is killers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So achievers want big numbers. They want to win. They want to be at leaderboard. They want prizes. They want trophies. They want to complete things. Killers want to impact other players. This can be good or bad, usually non-consensually and usually bad, hence killer. Explorers want to discover new things, understand complex systems, learn and use that knowledge to their advantage. And socializers want to talk to people. Killers have a tendency to suppress achievers, as achievers get frustrated when killers ruin their day. Killers are actually suppressed by explorers because explorers are not affected by being killed nearly as much, and usually know some sort of trick up their sleeve so that way they can actually turn it back on the killers, which they absolutely hate. And socializers just kind of feed on them their own.
Like Katya Stia, who was able to circumvent the entire cluster without being killed. You don't do that without some skill.
Correct.
She's an explorer.
When I say explorer, right. That is an explorer, but that's not the only kind of explorer. Like
Mhm.
somebody who actually does like hacking sites is not the only kind of thing that makes an explorer. Now, a lot of that content is explorer-ish, as you can tell, because there's different things to learn about these. Like there's layers to exploration content, which is very explorer-friendly. But
In a
like
sense,
even
all
people,
EVE players are explorers, though, Ash, because they have to delve into the arcane game that is EVE.
Correct, and that's why I was saying like the video Eve for a long time selected for killers and explorers basically. But like another good example of an explorer would be Fonsui, who's a major theory crafter for the Abyss. Right, he's not necessarily going out there and probing things down, but he is tinkering with the numbers in order to try to discover things that haven't been discovered yet.
Now, we were talking about Myers-Briggs test earlier, and I think you need to ask CCP Siegel's taxonomy on those models to get something meaningful and actually do a special classification for EVE players. Because as Don Dinkel also pointed out, you can't really put people into one of those categories alone. It's a variation. It's more multifaceted than just one class, right? So we may actually need a better classification system, and mixing them up and figuring out what actually fits the EVE player base is maybe useful.
As Hilmar was saying,
Yes, and
there's only 2 genders, but already in the world there are places where they have 4 genders classified or 5, and in the future there will be multiple genders. So why isn't that in the game? Indeed.
Well, so as far as that's why I didn't say there are 4 types of people. I said there are 4 types of player motivations. So different players can have multiple of them. You can shift between them, whatnot. And there's probably some underlying cause as to why each one of them and what personalities cause you to go into that kind of stuff. This reminds me of there's a Jason Vanderberg did a like 7-year study where he mapped video game players to the ocean test to determine what kind of video game someone would like based on their openness, their agreeableness, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently it works pretty well. Incidentally, EVE players are knights, which are PvPers that want a purpose.
Yeah.
Well, it's more like when you look even at the EVE mobile app. Actually, it shows your skill. It doesn't say, "Oh, you're mostly charisma" or "You're mostly this or that."
Mhm.
In the activity tracker in game, it actually shows where you fit on the different dimensions, and it draws you a shape.
I like what Ashterothi said. He didn't come to EVE Online to play the good guy. He came to East
Wow.
What was it? I said it wrong. Already messed it up.
Well, the ad at the time was EVE Online, be the villain. And so I came in and I said, I didn't join EVE to be the villain. I came to be the hero in a game in which that choice matters. Jesus.
And then they clapped.
Yeah, and then they clapped.
And everybody gave me $100, and his
Yes.
name was Albert Einstein.
And then he swung his
Exactly.
cloak around his head and disappeared. All right. If you guys want to talk about these sorts of things, hang out at Talking in Stations Discord in the public channel. Is what we do most of the day. For now, that's all we have today. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks very much for hanging around. Just wait 1 second while we figure out who to raid so that you can continue to watch EVE Online content. And let's see.
That woolly white rhino guy in chat, he's a good guy. How you doing, guy?
Marquee Dragon is doing some abyssal stuff.
Yeah, looks good. It's a built-in audience. We're
Well,
looking
there's
for
extra squishy that's PvPing, which is always entertaining.
extra squishy. All right, I'll take your suggestion. We'll do Marquee Dragon next time. Thank you, guys. Oof. I had to change a tire earlier today, so that's why we're on a little bit late. So we'll see you tomorrow. I'm trying to make it at 1500. Okay, guys, here you go. We'll see you soon. Bye.